Welcome back to Retro Wednesday at the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike, and today I want to talk to you about the Ramen Toys 80 Commander Air Force Commander. Now, they did send me this test shot so that I can take a look at it. I could talk about articulation, I can talk about tolerances, I can talk about how all of the weapons work on there. Compare this to a slew of other things. We're going to talk about this coming up. All right, so here it is in the packaging, and this is just the clamshell part, but it all fits everything just right, the way it should, and it's got an extra piece that goes over the top, which is really cool. It holds everything in place. But let's get a little size comparison on the packaging real quick. So this is the Akiko figure. So I guess the newest one I picked up from some sort of ninja movie that's out there. But one of the things is you're going to see that very similar in size to the packaging, except it's got a different orientation. Instead of portrait, it would be landscape. So just kind of picturing this like this, and you can get an idea of what the packaging is going to look like when it's done. So here he is out of the package, and it looks good. And this is a ton of accessories, pretty much everything you'd expect to have, with a couple of extra sets of hands and all of the weapon systems, and you get the helmet, and you get a special helmeted head. So we're going to get into all of that, but let's take a look at articulation first. Alright, so looking at articulation on this guy, first off I want to talk about the head. The head looks pretty good. It is, out of all of them, looks the closest to the tune, and we're going to talk a little more about the heads down the road, but this one here is, out of all the three head sculpts, probably the closest. And kind of going with a bit of a flesh tone. I think this is the tone that they're going to go with. Maybe it's a little bit lighter than that. But anyway, head goes up, down. It's on a double type ball joint. So I'm going to show you in here. There's a ball joint, and it's a T-bar kind of double ball joint, so you can get quite a bit out of it. It's real easy to pop on and pop off, and so you can get all kinds of looks and angles and stuff with it if you choose so. So there it is. Now it's going to be a little bit less when you have the helmet on. So getting into the shoulders. Now we do have these shoulder pieces right here that restrict it just a bit. But in order to get kind of the pose, you have to move that up like so. And so you can get quite a bit of range with that shoulder. You do have the bicep swivel right there. And of course, everyone's going to want to get some sort of a Centurion pose with these. So that's kind of, it's doable. Very easily doable. And the fact it made these move so that kind of looks pretty cool the way they did that. So anyway, the bicep swivel. We have a double jointed elbow to right about there. And then the hands, they're on a ball joint, basically. Now let's show you how well they pop off, just as easy as everything else, as the head. And there's that ball joint. So that's pretty simple right there. And getting into the waist swivel. Now, out of all of this, one of the things they did want me to do is to let them know the tolerances. And how do the tolerances feel? How tight are the joints and all of that? The waist is I'd say the loosest of it all, but as you can see, it's not bad at all. It's not bad. It's just, out of all the joints, the rest of the joints are a lot tighter and hold better than the waist. But the waist itself, I've never had it fall out of a pose, so. And I've been messing around with this thing for a bit now, so. All right, we have some movement with a ball joint. Now, it doesn't get much range to the right, quite a bit of range to the front, and a bit of range to the back. You got the bicep swivel, or bicep, the thigh, same idea, thigh swivel. And then it does have a double jointed knee, but it's the way it's designed, it's not really going to give you much more than about that. But I don't need much more than that. But if you're doing maybe a flight pose with this guy, you can get a flight pose with this guy, and it works. And then getting down to the feet, you do have a little bit, this ball joint, I believe. I never popped a foot off to check, but I'm pretty sure it's ball jointed in there. And so a little bit of hindrance by the design, but it stands really well. So maybe I like that. You know, I kind of like the way that articulation is. Power extreme. Let's get this guy all suited up with his stuff. Now, one of the things I like to do when I suit up my figure for Ace, and Ace is my favorite, so I'm glad they sent me my favorite, is put these on as the jets. And that's kind of one of the things I do. They plug in really nice, and they feel tight, and they plug in and out. And unlike the vintage ones, they don't clip in and then you have to pull them out with a lot of force. Now looking at this, they made sure that all of the tolerances were just right so that it'll fit in, and it fits in, and that works. That works really well. It looks really good. Now getting into the front piece, let's plug it in, get this guy armored up, and looks great. Looks great. Also, right here and right here. And there we go. Now, with that, to put the helmet on, we do have to remove the head. And I'm going to do that. If you're curious about the head we're about to put on, this is the helmet in two parts. The helmet's in two parts. He fell because I bumped him, but anyway, I bumped the thing I'm using. This is the head, and it's pretty much the exact same head, except it's bald. So that the helmet will fit on, and it'll look right when it's helmeted. So it's got the same plug-in piece, and it's interesting how this one has the yellow plastic. So, and put the helmet on. Right there, kind of has like a RoboCop vibe to it, right? And here we go. There it is. And there's his head. I didn't get it plugged in right. All right, so here he is all armored up, and it does look pretty good. So one thing I want to point out is this blue, I believe, is the same blue that we're going to get with the figure. So it'll be on the figure. And this piece won't be blue when we get it. It'll be more of that cream color white to it. But this is, you know, since it's still prototype test shot stuff, that I think they were just testing colors to send out, especially since we got this. And now that I see prototype Star Wars figures, I kind of understand why they show up with these kind of colors on them and stuff. So, but that's more of the Jake or the Armor Commander, and then this would be the Air Force Commander. But yeah, looks pretty good. Let's see how this stuff holds in place just fine. And we put the arms down, and we've got his missiles on him, and then we can kind of put him maybe in some sort of a pose here where he's going to be shooting a missile. Looking at making maybe some sort of a pose that you can put this guy in, and then like how you gonna pose your guys on your shelf. That'd be pretty cool. This piece here. Now these pieces do kind of fall off a little bit, and I do believe there's going to be a wash on it too, so they kind of have to have some sort of a tolerance adjustment to it. But still, this looks great, and it really works. I'm excited for it. But I think it's going to be more fun to sort of do comparisons side by side. All right, so one of the biggest problems with the vintage one was that it didn't have very much articulation to it. So with it not having much articulation, this thing is highly articulated, and we're kind of getting something that we've never gotten before, and that is really awesome. So really liking that. And side by side, they look pretty good. Now you notice that there's no shoulder pads here. And they added a stylized shoulder pad right there. And then getting down a little bit lower, these look very similar. You can put the gun on the shoulder like he's got his gun on his shoulder. You can put the missiles on the arms, and you can do all that kind of stuff. So that all works really well there. So also, looking at the back of it, that's kind of how that looks. So let's get this looking side by side right here so you can kind of see. Now there's only one spot here where there were 3 spots there. So there's some differences in their design choice in the way they did it. And they did it more for display purposes. And I just didn't point this out, but this does articulate kind of like this one does, except this one is on a spring mechanism where this one is just friction based. So anyway, that's kind of how they look from the back. All right, so this is a comparison I was really curious about myself, because this is, I think, a binocular figure that they made in the 80s or something, but it was a scaled down version and around the 6-inch scale. And he is slightly taller than this guy. So this one's a little smaller than this guy, and I've been kind of using this one as to gauge how big these will be. So it's really close, actually. This one is more sleek and streamlined when it comes to the design, and this guy's a little chunkier because it's just based on the originals. But back and forth, they do look pretty good side by side. Maybe I should take some of the gear off. here we go with all of the gear off the front, so you can kind of see if you have like a figure like this or similar to this, then you can have a pretty good idea of how tall he is, how big he is, and how he scales. So how does he scale next to Star Wars Black Series and G.I. Joe Classified? I think Duke's a little bit on the taller side of the G.I. Joe Classifieds, and I kind of think this is about average height for Mando, but I think Mando's a 6 foot tall dude. But anyway, around the same height, maybe a slight tad, quarter of a head shorter here, and shoulder to shoulder, his shoulders are actually taller than, well, he's got those 80 shoulder pads going on, but still, that's how he looks compared to some of the modern stuff that's out there these days. Okay, so here we are with the Armor Commander, and compared to Jake and the basic Jake weapon system, one of the things you're going to notice here, there's a couple of things that are different about these, the setups, and really the main differences are going to be in the weapons. So looking at this double gun, there's not a back peg to peg it in from the backside, which doesn't bother me at all. That peg on the toy sort of makes it look like it breaks the sculpt a little bit of a weapon. This piece here in the front, which it's really kind of hard to see any detail on it because it's not colored or painted or anything like that. So, but it does have a little bit of detail on there, and quite a bit actually. And so it mirrors, it's quite similar to what's going on with this one here. And then looking at this piece up the top here, so it's different than what Jake had going on, and sort of like an infrascope kind of thing. It's got some detail on the back, and the front's supposed to have a piece of glass on it, and it's going to look even different than this when it actually comes out. But let's take a look at the back of these guys. So we're going to see that we have the giant cannon. The giant cannon is scaled down, and my vintage one something fell off. Anyway, it's scaled way down to be a little bit more reasonable for holding and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to look at that here in just a second. And then the backpack. Now, with this backpack, it's supposed to come with an additional antenna. They didn't send me the antenna for it, so I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just trying to gauge how it's going to look when it's done, and this is enough to sort of gauge how it's going to look when it's done. And so there it is. Pretty interesting. It's so much smaller than the original one. No launching mechanism or anything, just kind of sits in there and does its job. But we're going to take a look at that piece and what else you can do with that missile launcher. So I do want to show my missile launcher that they sent me. It's a little curved, and I think that's a mistake. That's possibly just because it was crammed in a bag of a whole bunch of other parts, and maybe it warped in the heat in the mail. But it is curved. It's not supposed to be that way, and I'm pretty sure I'm sure it's not going to be like that when it comes in the mail for you, because you're just going to be packed and protected. That's why they package things the way they package them. But anyway, here we go. It plugs. You can plug it into the arm, and you can have a nice cannon going on here in the arm if that's something that you want. And I do want to showcase that I did actually change out the hands here. So you have like sort of an open hand, and then you have a gripping hand, and you can do a lot of stuff with it however you want. Maybe you want the Armor Commander to reload his bazooka. Alright, so here's the Naval Commander compared to the vintage version, and I guess I should turn these around, and these vintage ones are in really rough shape. These little engine pieces. This was probably not my best Max to compare them to, but anyhow, you can kind of get size and comparison that way, and kind of how they look. Let's get a side angle, and you can see how much smaller and slightly different shaped that fin is, and it's a different shape and design to this. Although it's similar, it's different. There's no holes in this to plug other accessories in like there are in this one here. I do want to point out you do have 2 holes on the thigh, 3 on the lower, and then you have 1 on the upper arm, and then 2 on the lower arm on the holes there. So, and then 6 in the front, 5 in the front, 5 in the back for the holes on the figure. I didn't point that out just yet, but looking at the backpack, the launcher, and all that, that looks real straightforward, very similar to the vintage one. I don't have anything to showcase the green, what color the green will be. We have the yellows, but that's the Naval Commander yellow, so I don't think that these, I think these will be a little bit more vibrant, all of these parts here. So do notice from the back angle that these have kind of spikes on them where these do not, and then yeah, just no launching mechanism in it. Very similar yet different in the design of all of this. But yeah, it looks pretty good, and that is Max's stuff. You know, I mean Naval Commander. Now, my son and I picked up this on sale, and I don't know why this is on sale. I don't know, is it old or something? But this is an Iron Man, and I thought that max head might look pretty good, so I just did a little bit of modification to the max head, to that head, so it'll fit on here. So let's see how it looks. I do want to point out I put a little bit of this on the ball joint, and since it is a test shot, I mean, obviously it's not full go, ready to go. So this is actually like a Tony Stark head, kind of, but I do want to get into a conversation about the head sculpts. Now, a lot of people have complained about the head sculpts and not liking them or whatever. I know on their Naval Commander head sculpt, we have a goatee instead of the mustache. Now, I'm going to address this, and it's just sort of my opinion. They are still working on some stuff that I'm not really going to talk about just yet. I'm hoping they do give us an alternate set of heads down the road, but we are getting the head sculpts that they've already put out. And they launched this whole project as more of a stylized version. They never called it Centurions, never once said it is Centurions, but they called it the 80s Commanders, the Naval Commander and the Air Force Commander and all that kind of stuff. So it's a stylized take. So I never expected it to be super tuned on the heads. I expected it close, which I feel like this is close, but not super tune accurate. Now, it wasn't what I felt they were going for. I personally thought they were doing that, so, of course, for legal issues, right? That's the way I felt. Now, that was my personal opinion. I'm still 100% full go on them with the head sculpts they have. If down the road we get tuned head sculpts, then I'll just be ecstatic and happy. But I'm really going to just display mine with the helmet on. I mean, I think that's how 90% of people are going to. I don't know how many people are going to have them holding the helmet or whatever for their display, but that's the way it is with the head sculpts. And so they have listened to what people have said, and they've lightened the tones to make them look, the skin tones will match the original animation, and that's where they're going to go with it. And I really think that this Tony Stark head looks a lot like their Max, and that really kind of looks like Max to me. Okay, so I've been sitting on these pictures and information about the Silverhawks for a while. They did a reveal about a week and a half ago, something like that, that they are going to be partnering with Super 7. Ramen Toy is partnering to make Silverhawks. Now, they're not going to look like Super 7s. They're going to be smaller than Super 7s. They're going to be a stylized take. They're going to be different. But they are making Silverhawks as one of their next projects. And with that, they are not going to vac metalize. They wanted to vac metalize the figures, and they told me from the get-go that if they did them, they wanted to vac metalize. So they've been looking into that this whole time, and between the cost factor, between the ability to actually make the figures and them hold up to some sort of posing and wear without the vac metalized chipping off and wearing off, they don't think they can do it. Here's the thing. When you look at this, it's vac metalized, but there are 5, 6 parts that are vac metalized, and they don't rub against each other very much. A little bit, but not very much. So that would all chip off if you have all these different points of articulation that we're seeing with the modern figures. So like all of this articulation and all of the parts that potentially can rub and all of that. And then that's one of the issues that I'm hearing about this. But the other issue with vac metalizing the whole figure, the materials and the material costs. They were talking about possibly using die-cast metal or something like that. So if you want to get an idea of what a shiny paint job could look like, I think that this Iron Man that I've got a Max-looking head in is ridiculously shiny. I mean, this is, in my opinion, what you would kind of see from their paint scheme. If they did paint, I'm thinking it'll look like this. And we can see that Hasbro's doing it with their figure, and this looks really close. Like, side by side, almost looks the same shininess as the vac metalized. Now, it's still not quite as shiny, but really, really close. So they're going to have a paint, and they're trying to get it as shiny and reflective as they can, and I think it's going to come out looking like this. I don't know for sure or not, but it's pretty interesting. So we're going to follow this Silverhawks project also. So this has been my look at the 80s Commanders from Ramen Toy, and this is the test shot, still working it out before final production, and I think it's pretty good. It is pretty solid. There's really not much more they can improve on it. The couple of minor things I pointed out are still pretty minor in my opinion, and I think it is great. It looks excellent on the shelf. I can't wait to get the actual colored versions in hand. I did order 2 sets myself, so I could have one to keep sealed and one to open up. But then Will we get some new figures with new weapon systems and all that stuff? Still unknown. We still don't know. There's going to be announcements coming soon, probably by the end of the year, or at least shortly after the release of these. So I'm looking forward to getting mine, and you can get yours too. Like, subscribe, Teddy Irvinger out.